I call the meeting to order. Our 2020 Ulster County Historical Society Board meeting. Um, I have to start dramatically. We had such plans. A mystery night, interesting talks, a week-long camp for kids. In preparation for our planned exhibits, we invested money in our infrastructure. We upgraded the electricity on our first floor, putting in better outlets, installing gallery lighting in the parlor and dining room to replace inadequate lamps. And as March started, we hoped that we could still open in May. And then May came and went, and by June we knew we were not going to be able to open at all. So our planned lectures were postponed, our exhibits shelved for this year, and we decided we could use the time wisely, though. We have had financial struggles because of COVID. Though not only did all sources of income except for membership dry up, but when we had our annual servicing of our boiler, we found out that this ancient machine had developed a hole and was beyond repair. We need to spend an unbudgeted roughly $15,000 to replace it so that our collection can remain at a safe temperature through the winter. We have hopes of adding summer temperature and humidity controls, but we'll need to do a major fundraising for that. I'm sure you recognize this as a low-key request. If you can donate something for our heating and cooling system, however large or small, please do so.
Rose.
Suzanne, with the help of her incredible sons, undertook to repaint the inside of the building. We had long discussions among ourselves. What colors should we use? Were the current colors historically accurate? What could we do to investigate what colors should be used? In the end, we decided the most appropriate conservative approach was to use the colors we had. So the Hausberg family plastered and painted. Our team completed the total redesign of the tool room, which involved removing everything from the room, cleaning and dusting the interior, assessing every item for its contribution to the story we were trying to tell, and then putting it back together. We now have an amazing display, one that is pleasant to look at, educational, and with great signage. Bill did 2 live broadcasts about the collection, which was seen by a large number of people. The team next tackled the upstairs. What story were the rooms telling? How should we use the space? We decided that our collection related to textiles told the story, but that story was ill-served, hidden in a tiny upstairs room. The large hall and adult bedroom were dismantled. Looms, hetchels, the spinning jenny, other things were dusted off and given new prominent positions in the upstairs rooms, and plans were made to determine which of our large collection of textiles should be placed for display. You heard Bill talk about tools last year. In a few minutes, Leslie Lefevre Stratton will provide more details on renovations related to our textiles. But this wasn't all that was going on while COVID raged in the spring and summer. Building on an exhibit from last year that included objects related to the Elverhoy Art Colony, a research group was found that included Dr. William Rhodes, board member emeritus and professor emeritus of art history, Vivian Wadlin, editor of the About Town Area Guide and ex-town historian of Lloyd, Sanford Levy, independent art dealer, Ellen Stewart of the Marlborough Historical Society, as well as our own Susan Hausberg, Leslie Lefevre Stratton, and Leslie Melvin. This group is working on a monograph about the colony, and in the future, when we're confident the museum can open again, we'll assemble an exhibit about the colony. Suzanne will talk about it later. After a few minutes of business, voting for the officers of the society, and having Leslie and Suzanne's presentations, we're honored to have Stephen Blauweiss with us via Zoom. He will give us a photo talk preview based on his upcoming book, Historic Kingston, Looking Back, Moving Forward. And they will also let us know about the opportunity you have seeing 4 one-hour presentations via Zoom. Okay, so for the voting, this is sort of weird because we have 2 members, Ellen and Andy here. So Ellen and Andy, you get to vote for the membership. So we're glad you're here. So our slate is myself for president, Bill for vice president, Marion for treasurer, and Matt. Did I say? I didn't say Bill. Bill. I'm sorry. Bill for vice president, vice chair.
You did say it.
I did say it. Yeah. Oh, he's waving to say hi. Okay. Marion for treasurer, and Matt as our esteemed secretary. So Andy and Ellen, do you agree to the slate?
This is Andy. I'll agree. I don't know much about the background of everybody, but I'm willing to continue the way it is. I want to say that if the family needs the phone for an emergency, I will have to get off the voice. But I think we're good for now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Agree.
Okay, thank you. And Ellen? Oh, you're on mute, Ellen.
Can't hear her.
Okay.
Hi. So I'm voting in favor, I guess, of Susan, Bill, Marion, and Matt.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks very much.
Sure.
Okay, so now we're going to turn the screen over to Leslie, who's going to talk about the changes that have been made for our textiles. Okay.
Okay. So this this PowerPoint was basically taken from an earlier newsletter entry that I did, and I've the way I've done PowerPoints in the past is with text and then with pictures. So I will read to keep myself on focus here, and then I'll ask Susan to just continue. Next slide. So as we all grapple with the challenges of COVID, the Ulster County's Historical Society is using this downtime to make changes to the upstairs rooms in the Bevier House so that when the museum is finally opened again, visitors will have an opportunity to see refreshed rooms along with the new exhibit, Textiles in Ulster County. And when we use the term refreshed, we're talking about rooms that are not going through major restoration or renovation, but are simply being, for lack of a better term, tidied up, edited, and made to just look a little bit more visitor friendly, and hopefully will create a more accurate setting for people to see. And also because these are bedrooms, they do tie in very beautifully with the idea of doing textiles in Ulster County, because most of the time we look at textiles in a bedroom setting. Okay, next slide. So these two pictures on the left were taken at the same time, obviously, two pictures of the the east bedroom before we dismantled the rooms. It's hard to see in the lighting, but since then, these colors have been refreshed. It will be a much more pleasurable room to look at from a wall paint point of view. And again, as was mentioned before, we have no historic structures reports, so we don't know what the actual paint scheme for the house is. And an HSR would also include, a complete HSR would also include a color analysis, which we have not done yet. So we've stuck with colors that are basically the same as before, but are just a little, again, refreshed. It just looks a little nicer. We've taken lots and lots and lots of photographs of this process so that we can always go back to it, and that we can leave a paper trail, if you will, behind for future staff, because there will be lots of future staff, and they will know kind of what it was we were doing back in the day. So this room shows the period. Some of the furniture in the room is period and some of it is not. We've got the maple beds, 1830s, 1840s, with coverlets that sort of set the tone for the era, which would have been the sort of mid-empire, late empire, early Victorian, mid-19th century look that we're going for. And these are coverlets that are probably have family history to them, which we have to research more. The curtains are a brown print, lovely, probably a good period reproduction, but they are not historically correct to the era that we're trying to show. Now, if we were trying to show a bedroom from 1900 or colonial revival, or certainly into the 20th century, these curtains would suffice. But they are also very old. They're tattered. They're worn out. They do not. They just need to be. They need to be retired. And so we have removed them. We've also removed the rugs on the floor for the same reason. And if we go to the next slide, I'll show you some details of that. So the little textile is typical, is indicative of actually all of the little rugs in the room. It's been worn. The Ulster County Historical Society has always had the policy of allowing people to walk into the rooms, and I think we still want to do that, but we have to be very careful about how we use our textiles in the future. And they've been walked on, they've been damaged over time. You can see the schnibbles of stuff on the floor there. The textile is in really bad shape, but it's a wonderful hooked rug. Rather, of course, than tossing it, obviously, we would simply photograph it, vacuum it, roll it up, put it into acid-free tissue, and store it away as a document of an era. It's also, in my opinion, it's just kind of a cool rug. It's sort of an abstraction, and we really would want to have it for future textile references, but it will be removed. It will not be put back on the floor. The same thing goes for the curtains. I didn't have any really decent photographs of what the curtains looked like up front, but they are, I think they're probably a vintage reproduction of an earlier type. Maybe not, maybe they are the real thing, but at any rate, they are terribly tattered and worn and faded, and literally in places they're rotting. So because they've been hung, even with the UV shades on the windows, they probably were hanging way before the UV shades were installed. So it's time to retire them as well. And they too are a wonderful document. We would not throw them out. We would simply protect them, put them away, and store them for a future date when we can do more research on them. The beds now are photographed after all of the restoration, or excuse me, the repainting, the refreshing was done. And it, again, these slides don't do justice, but the room just is bright. It's clean looking, it's fresh. We can start with sort of a new, a palette we can start with a fresh slate, and we can create, I hope, a wonderful room in the future. The beds will stay. The highboy is of interest, sometimes referred to actually as a drawer on frames. It's an 18th century piece. This is the kind of furniture that would have been very fashionable downstairs in the 18th century of the Bevier House, if they'd had such a thing. I'm not actually sure they did, but it's a piece that we have to research the provenance on. But at any rate, from a general antiques point of view, interpretation point of view, if people had this kind of furniture in their homes in the 18th century, by the time this room was interpreted as a mid-Victorian room, they would have, this piece of furniture would have been considered very unfashionable. And so, like furniture that we use today, when we don't want to get rid of it, but we don't maybe want to have it out as a focus piece in our living room. I don't know, things have changed that way, but a piece like this would have been brought upstairs and relegated to a bedroom, where it would still serve an incredibly useful function for clothing, for domestic, for sheets, towels, that kind of thing. Perfect in a bedroom of this era. The radiator is not period either, but we can't do anything about that, and it's just what it is for now. So these are sort of the major pieces of furniture that will set the tone for the new room. When we undid the beds, took off the historic textiles to look at them more closely, to get them out. And of course, everything had to come out of here before we painted anyway. And again, here, I just want to say that Susan and her boys did an amazing job. It was a she did this all by herself, basically over the winter, and they look incredible. The rooms look just incredible. Anyway, we found old bed ticks stuffed with straw, actually with corn husks, and I don't know. Can you see the text, or is it covered up by?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, all of the text.
Yeah, you need to sort of click
over
on the
No, I don't want to
on the
this high
yeah.
thumbnail video.
Yeah, there's a thing that you need to click on
top.
that I don't know if you can see it. I'm putting it up mine where it says who's talking, and if you click on the dash, the first one, it takes away all the list of names.
That's hide thumbnail video. I'm
I
gonna
don't
try
know.
it. Sorry. Oops.
Well, anyway,
Okay,
we can
that's better.
yeah, we can
Yes.
see it. Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay.
So so we can't continue to use the bed ticks with their corn husks, because that organic material is bad for the collections. It's in current museum practice. One would want to stuff bedding with would want to replace old bedding with an inert polyethylene material, which we can do. But we photographed everything, and in the course too of looking at these bed ticks, we also discovered that some of the sheets had the old cotton repairs to them, the old linen, what we refer to sometimes as homespun. Linens in the 19th, well, linens up until linens are still expensive, let's face it. Linens have always been valued in households, and certainly in the earlier period, you had to have a lot of them. And they were oftentimes marked, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But they were repaired when they were damaged. And this, I found a wonderful cotton patch repair. It's kind of a crude repair, but it does indicate that linens were, valued and were repaired when damaged. This sheet in the inset here, this detail of the linen sheet also shows that there's a vertical seam, and that's because early sheets were put together in two pieces. The looms weren't wide enough to weave a one wide width, so they were woven in length and then sewn together, cut from the loom and then sewn together. So very often that's an indication of well, it's always an indication of an early bed sheet. What else? Yeah, so we found this wonderful stuff, this wonderful documentation underneath these great historic beds, textiles. So here's a detail of these textiles. Actually, in actual fact, the two beds, even though the blue and white overshots or whole cloth coverlets are, excuse me, not whole cloth, double woven coverlets look very alike. They're actually two different coverlets. But at any rate, here's a detail of the one coverlet on the bed with its reverse in the inset. Very prized, not woven by grandma. That's a big no-no. And we now know that these kinds of woven textiles were woven in professional workshops by men who had the kinds of looms, the multi-harnessed looms, big equipment that that a home weaver, whether it was a man or a woman, probably did not have at their disposal. Most of the coverlet weavers in New York State were of Scots, Irish, English, Welsh, UK descent. They came over here to ply, which of course is a good textile term, ply their trade in America, where they could make a better living than they could back in England. So and a lot of them were coverlet weavers were trained as carpet weavers. This is why the carpet techniques that were woven at the time are very, very that were used at the time are very similar. Anyway, these are beautiful examples. We will do more research on them, and we will want to return them to the room. part of course, of the wonderful research that also still needs to be done is on the linens themselves. Ulster County Historical Society doesn't have a huge collection, but they have a wonderful small genealogically, I think, related collections, particularly of certain ladies who seem to have had a lot of the same, are from the same collection, including Sarah Crom. We see her initials on many of the sheets. So we have to go back to our donor files and figure out who gave these and also to what the relationship is and who Sarah Crom was. But they give you a really, really wonderful opportunity to see the kind of needlework that was routine for women to have learned in the 18th and 19th century. Not so much so that they could create those beautiful needlepoint pictures that everybody gets excited about, but so that they could mark their linens. As I said before, linens inventories show that linen collections or linen, your household linens came in very large sets very often, and so they needed to be marked. The reason they were marked was not only was it for inventory, but it was also a way for you to keep track of them if you sent them out to have them laundered. And a lot of people did their own laundering, but some women actually could send their laundry out to be done. And also if they had servants, they wanted to make sure, or slaves, they wanted to make sure that these linens were saved and not, can you go back, Susan, for just a minute?
Sure.
And not pilfered. And that happened. Now, Annie Norton in 1881, this is a later marking, but many markings were done with a pen as opposed to embroidered. And that is that you see more of those actually than anything in collections. Okay, moving on. So these last few pictures are just basic pictures of sort of the process we went through to get these rooms up and ready. And of course, we're in process now, but we will be continuing this wonderful project through the winter, and hopefully we'll have something to show next year. Here is Suzanne on the ladder removing stuff. I couldn't get up, and I can't get up and down on ladders very well anymore. So, and she's wonderful at it. And anyway, this is just a quick shot of her starting to remove some of the collections off the walls before we started to work. And of course, as most of you know, that inset picture shows what the room looked like before the work started. Okay, so when you walk into this room now, it's very different. Here's some of our production equipment of the larger types, the larger pieces that will be on this new exhibit. And they're here right now just because they were placed around for us to get a sense of what kind of space we're working with. We have removed the carpet. We've rolled it, we're cleaning it, or we're vacuuming it, we've rolled it, and we're gonna put it away. It's a lovely carpet, but again, it's gonna be walked on if we leave it down. And also I think it's kind of, we've decided it was visually a distraction for the exhibit that we plan on doing. So we've removed it. And of course, all of these artifacts will have appropriate signage, labeling when they get repositioned. We'll be talking a little bit about the context of, no, I can't use my cursor. Okay, so, but Susan can. Okay, so here's a flax break. You've got your large wool wheels and smaller wheels that were used. I think that's another kind of wheel. I'm not exactly sure what that is yet. We've got to do some research on it. Okay. And then of course the smaller wheels, the little wheels were used for spinning flax. We have winders. We have, as you can see in the picture, we've got the flax break. And the picture on the wall is going to stay put because even though it's kind of out of sync a little bit with the artifacts, it will help us to talk about garments and clothing and time periods, maybe children's clothing a little bit. These kinds of paintings with their very ornate frames and the very ornate moldings are extremely hard to move. This is a hugely heavy piece. we have no place to store it, so it's going to stay where it is. So there. And then we have our spinning jenny, which is again a large piece of, this is actually was used for home production of yarns and threads. We'll talk about that in the exhibit. That will be moved into the big room. And in the meantime, and again, we'll get a lot of signage and discussion because spinning jennies are actually quite important in the history of American textile production. And you don't see them very much anymore in this state. They were usually broken up later on. They're kind of ugly and big. And after you stopped using them in homes, what the hell are you going to do with something like that? So it's big and bulky. And then the room that we have taken that spinning jenny out of, we are turning, and I'm very excited about this. We're going to be turning this into a small display room to talk about domestic sewing. Sewing machine, we'll probably have a quilt. We'll be talking about garment production. We'll be talking, and we also have a cabinet that we will be using to display accessories, small accessories related to sewing, related to the whole domestic sewing sphere. And this, of course, will be a room that people obviously will be able to walk into and look at these things closely. We have a lot of really interesting things to talk about. And then, of course, the whole business with signage. I mean, it looks very sparse right now because we're just in the process of, placing things. But the signage on the walls, I think the accessories that we'll be adding to the walls, hanging and in other places in those rooms, will give, I think, folks an exciting opportunity to see collections that don't get seen very much and that kind of are, marginalized a little bit, so that we will really be able to relate it to our collections and also to Ulster County history, but also to a larger history of textiles in the Northeast. At any rate.
Thank you, Leslie. That was fabulous.
That's that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Suzanne's going to talk now for a few minutes about the Elverhoy exhibit, and then we will go. Karen will be joining us to talk about the Kingston thing.
The Elverhoy research group that Susan talked about before has been unable to meet for most of the summer, but we're back at it. The Elverhoy, for those of you that may not have heard some of our other things about it or seen the exhibit from last year, was an arts and crafts colony that existed in Milton from 1912 to 1937. Some of the major names associated with the art colony were a group of Scandinavian gentlemen who first had a colony in Racine, Wisconsin. They found property in Milton that they really liked, and so they moved out here. It's right on the water, but the names we know to be associated with the colony are Ralph Pearson, who was an etcher, James Scott, who was a painter, and they had several metalworking artists, Andrews Anderson, Johannes or John Morton, and Joseph Popelka. There were also weavers, sisters of James Scott, who was the painter, Bessie Scott and Henrietta Scott. We have been continuing research over the last several months, and Dr. William Rhodes, who will be writing a publication on this, has had a lot of help from our board member, Leslie Melvin. She's an amazing researcher and has just come up with tons and tons of information for him. He remains with plans to have his book published in 2021. And our hope was to have a full-scale exhibit here at the museum coordinated with his publication. However, in our last meeting, we discussed the probability that we may not be able to have the crowds that we felt would make all the work we had gone through on the exhibit, we would not be getting the crowds that we had hoped for. So also the option that we are not having full access to some of the other organizations that we know have particular items that we might either get on loan or get digital files of are, they're having their limited hours and stuff. So contact with them has been spotty and difficult. We made initial contact, but we haven't been able to follow through on some of these things. So the decision has been made that for 2021, we will do an online exhibit that will be hosted on the UCHS website, where we will feature documents, pieces that we already have on hand. We'll do it with photographs. Bill Rhodes is going to be doing an introduction to Elver Hoy prior to his book release. So we're hoping that will really build momentum over the course of the year when we're not sure that we can do the large events we wanted to do in association with this exhibit. And then hopefully by 2022, things will be back to normal and we can do a really excellent, very well-rounded exhibit rather than trying to do it piecemeal. In any event, Bill's book will be out and that'll be great to read. We'll all have some more information. People will understand better what Elver Hoy is, why it's important for this discussion, because it is a little known but very well respected art colony that had a brief history but a glowing one. So we're hoping that will happen. And that's my report.
Okay. What Stephen is going to be showing us is a preview of a rather complex project that they're putting together, showing about the history of Kingston. And that the video that they've created for that, usually they do like about a 1 hour video highlighting, for example, the history of the Rondout. But this is actually, I believe, 3 hours broken into 3 sections, and people can sign up to either watch them, as they're being presented, or to be able to go online and watch them afterwards. Stephen and Karen have presented before the society many times in the past, and we are always very happy to support their work. So
I did get a note that they are going to change the date. They originally were going to do it the 22nd of October.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't given me the new date, but perhaps we can tease that out of Stephen when he gets on his presentation.
Okay. In the meantime, does anybody have any comments they'd like to make about what we've presented and the direction that the museum is going in? One thing that I didn't really talk about is how we're working, we're thinking hard about what we want the museum to be. In the past, it's been a house museum. People drive by and they see the sign, Ulster County Historical Society, Bevier House, and often they continue driving. We don't have a name that draws people in, that helps them understand what our collection is. And also in thinking of it as a house museum, it's hard to distinguish ourselves from many house museums. And so the 2 presentations that we had today focus on the kinds of changes that we are working on making, to go from being strictly a house museum to being a museum that focuses on its collections. So we have the tool room collection, we have the textile collection, we have a unique Civil War collection that we have. We have the colonial kitchen, and we also plan for the dining room to be repurposed a bit from being, sort of a dining room with a big table, to being more of an exhibit space where we can have, right now we have up prints, but we also thought it would be nice to have more contemporary works there that relate to Ulster County. And so we'd be able to use our space differently from the way we have been using it. Tied in with that would be changing our name. And we've been toying with different names. And yeah, so so we've been toying with different names. We haven't come to any conclusion yet, but that's something that we will be, asking our membership to comment on. Other board members, did you want to say anything about this, our thinking of sort of repurposing, rebranding the museum?
Sure, I think we have a wonderful opportunity to broaden, there's a lot of great stories that are contained in the collections of this institution, and the limitations of trying to just talk about one family and their furnishings really doesn't serve the community. And I'm really excited by the changes that we're talking about instituting.
Yeah. Okay, here's Karen. Hi, Karen. While we wait for him, do you want to talk a minute or two about the videos that the whole presentation, the longer presentations that will be available for people?
Sure. Yeah, I'll kind of give a pre-talk. Stephen might repeat it, but till he gets in, I'll cover up. So many of you know about our previous book about the post office in Midtown Kingston, and we decided to do another one about all of historic Kingston. And it's going to be about twice as big, and we realized telling the story of Kingston that we really had so much to talk about Ulster County in a bigger picture that impacted Kingston. So what Stephen's going to present today, which is the first part of our book, is a broad Ulster County history that goes really in depth into things that affected Kingston. And then the historic Kingston portion of the book we'll be doing presentations about next year, more in detail about architecture and uptown and retail and all sorts of things. Yeah, so we are super excited. This is the first day we're actually sharing it with anybody. We've been working all year. We've been working a couple years, but very intently this year on this particular book. And today's kind of the debut of you guys getting a sneak peek of what we've been working on. What we're going to do is offer presentations on Zoom starting in a week or two, and then present each portion of the book. So the next portion will be next year. And then we're hoping to publish it this time next year. Very excited, with a lot of work to go and a lot of work that we've already done.
Let me just put on my background people noise and the music, and I'll get started. Not funny? Okay. That's okay. There'll be more medium funny things on the way. Okay, so lots to show you. Let's see.
Your screen yet?
I have my little notes here. Just a few little things of what the.
Okay.
Okay, I have my little written down. A few little things. My agenda.
Okay.
So, first of all, thank you so much for letting us show what we're working on, and we're really excited. We've been working 2 years. We did present, I think, to you guys, right? Did we show the book last year?
Yeah.
So we've gone way further. Like at that time, I forget how the duration of the book at that time, but it's 400 plus pages, 800 photographs. We had at that time a 45-page introduction to Ulster County. Now it's 90. And of course, it's still glazing over things, but we really just feel that the it's a nice primer, basically, And then, of course, each one of these topics that you'll see, because we're only showing the Ulster County part today, could be teased out into a book maybe again later in the format that we like to do. And then basically since of course we couldn't do any of our live events, like we've come to you at least several times. I think I've been to you at least 3 times with Lost Roundout, the post office book, and then showing this, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we decided to do, since I have the filmmaker background, is to make a kind of elaborate Zoom. That's why we wanted to show you. And that's why we feel like we're taking a chance. I don't know if people will be interested. It's just really convincing them that it's worthwhile. And we put so much effort, and you'll see, I'm going to show you a nice sampling of the hour. If 17 minutes is okay, I have that much just to give you a little taste of what we're really trying to put together here. And so this is in lieu of you know, the live events. And so, of course, a 400-page book, you can't do it in an hour. Even if you did 1 page a minute, you couldn't even do it. So this is the first of, sit down, or you're all sitting, a 4-hour series that will be not in one shot. So we have yet to produce it. So it's the first hour is about Ulster County, and then starting like maybe in February, we'll have then subsequent every other month, another hour of the Kingston depth of the book. And then, of course, you know, the $10, we're going to see if people are willing to pay. I hope they are. But ultimately, really what we're trying to do is get what we call the community sponsorship. You know, so that's the $100. One gets their name in the book. And, you know, we need to raise $30,000. You know, we're always willing to give our time for free. I don't know why, but we keep doing it. But of course, we can't lay out to get those actual books. So that's really where the hard nut, so to speak, is to try to reach that hurdle. And then we also up the price a little on this book, and we know that's a little tricky. So it's going to be $65 for the book. It's a great deal like now for someone to give $100, because for $100, you get a $65 book, you get your name in it, and this video series, which is $10 a pop times 4, you get that. So for $5 less, you get everything all included and your name in the book. Anyway, so that's just so you guys know what we're trying to do, you know, and to help share the word. A little bit, because since you're all the experts and representatives of the Ulster County history, we are going to dip our toe into Greene County. And we also know that it was, you know, until not 1801, Bill's leaving. Sorry, Bill, come back. No, you know, until 1801, which I didn't know before this research, that it was actually part of Ulster County, that lower part of Greene. So that really juicy little part of the upper that you all know, of course. And I know that I'm speaking to you. So when I'm describing things in the way that I would normally do to people who are not as familiar, of course, I know you know most of this. And then we're also open for critiques, you know, so we know that we might have really hit some zingers that are so wrong. So please let us know, you know, at the end or later, or email us so we don't, you know, there's so much information here that we might have made a few zinger boo-boos. And then, of course, we'd love to know later, either today, after this time, or you could always contact us with a critique. If you love it, of course, if you don't like it, then keep to yourself. No, we really want to know what you think. And especially one of the things that I have the chutzpah to say about these projects is I really feel that we've found this really interesting. It's not that easy to do. And part of it comes from, you know, being a filmmaker, storyteller. I've been an educator, and I taught at Pratt for 10 years, 25 years of teaching and stuff like that. Is the communication is so important, is that these projects are for someone who just came up from New York City or Georgia, doesn't know the first thing. And we can inspire and get a few things that even the top experts didn't know. And we know that we've done that. So that's the tricky little thing we try to straddle. And then let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna start with, so basically what I'm gonna start with a little bit of the print of showing you the layouts of this section of the book, the opening part, and which is the Ulster County history. So this is our new cover, which we changed up from what you saw last time. And I'm going to just kind of start. I'll zoom out a little bit. If you have your, if everyone has like seeing the other people there, like you can kind of grab the top of that little and drag it to the top of your screen. It'll be a little more out of your way. If you see like everyone along your sides, if you just drag them to your top of your screen, they'll kind of go along the top, which is better for viewing what we're doing today. All right, so of course our end pages, we always so love doing our end pages. And this is a whole nother thing that we'll do when we get to the Kingston part of the book, which we're not at yet. We would describe all these things like that this is when you come in Washington Avenue, there was an old covered bridge, and we do all that stuff, and we describe even just what's in this wonderful etching. Of course, we have our acknowledgements. These are our like slightly higher level, like for local businesses are $250. And we're starting to already get some people in our community sponsors. So here's our great new introduction.
Okay, we're just seeing the first one. We're still on the cover page.
Oh, you're still on the cover page?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why it does that. I think I clicked something off. 1 second. That happened to me. I was just on the radio and the same thing happened. So tell me if you don't hear, if you're not seeing what, let me try one more time and see what happens here.
Okay,
You
we're
see a
good.
table of contents?
We're good.
Okay. And then what I was just talking, okay, I'm gonna just keep going. So so here's our table of contents. So the left side is, this is literally what it'll look like in the book. I can't zoom out, so I guess that messed it up before. That left side is just the introduction. So that's 90 pages out of the 400. And then we, on the right, which we'll get to, you know, over the months, as far as video presentations, will be the different aspects of Kingston. But today, I'm literally going to show you the spreads. I'm going to really zip through them just to give you a little refresher of where we left off, because we've taken it so much further. And so these are the categories, Ice Age, etc. And we'll see these in detail now. So we literally do start at the Ice Age. We just got some new photographs. We're changing things all the time. These left ones, these are kind of a little bit of stock, and we've been traveling and we have a drone, and we have amazing jaw-dropping stuff that we can't wait to put in there. We, of course, touch on the indigenous, different tribes from the region. The Lenape, of course, were the most local. The Mohicans just north of us, and then the Iroquois, and we go into that detail. We love maps. One of our signature aspects of what we do, again, is to bring in these disparate things. So from our personal archives, the generosity of people we know. Bill has been wonderful, Jean Donner, and all the people you know, and then the Library of Congress, etc. We go all over the place. A nice part of the East India Company, how the Dutch kind of came. People, Heinrich Hudson really was English, but, you know, explaining all that, again, a lovely place to put maps. Of course, Stuyvesant, so we call this kind of like the colonial aspect, explaining Peter Stuyvesant, when the British took over. Jacob Astor, we sneak in, so when the Beavers were first there, and then growing up in Manhattan, I know about the Astor Place, you know, subway station, and why they have beavers there. So it's just another, as the same kind of thing that we did that I love to do, which is just be a sneaky way to branch out into these other little things, like I did with we did with the post office book. Of course, the lovely maps pointing out, you know, particular towns surrounding. The two main mountain systems, of course, would be the Catskill, which we primarily go into tons and tons of detail, which you'll see today. And of course, the Shawgunks, which goes south to Delaware from here. A little bit on the Empire State, just to give a sense again to what are some of the key things about New York State of when it established, of course, Kingston being the first capital, and then ultimately Albany. And we talk about the Capitol building and touch on urban renewal. Of course, the canal, and then how that in so many ways is directly connected to our D&H canal. The Rosendale cement, basically this whole page is Rosendale cement, but with really unique photographs telling the story of the Brooklyn Bridge, how that ties in, and the Statue of Liberty. And then again, sneaking in, just because of Rosendale cement, I get to tell about how they, you know, took 10 years to raise money for the pedestal, which was made from Rosendale cement, and then they almost didn't do it. And, you know, it's in Madison Square Park and things like that. Water everywhere. all the different aspects of water, from, the river, the creeks, the reservoir. So we go into detail on that. Of course, if you look on this center one, how the sloops, like from Rondout and now, and how they're up and back to New York City. The Brooklyn Bridge again is in the background. So there's all these little subtle things tied in. There's so much to look at. Again, 800 photographs throughout so just, really luxurious. Again, this is still part of the water part, and how mills and industry used waters on the creek and the dams and falls. And then even to where on to the extreme right with the Catterskill Falls was the tourist industry, and is still a major part of today. Of course, that's Greene County. The immigrant groups, we love, this is one of our favorite shots. I don't want to zoom in and mess up the presentation at the moment, but I would zoom in, and just one of my favorite shots. I'm just seeing all those ethnic groups working together. If you just peek at that, and then we give a little primer on how the different groups who came to the region. Agriculture, how it started with the Native Americans and early vineyards. The very first wine vineyard was just south, of course you know all this stuff, but just south of New Paltz. One thing that I never knew growing up in New York City, that New York State is the second producer of peaches, highest after Georgia, second in apples after, we all knew that after Washington State, but there were 180 varieties of peaches. It's just mind-blowing. Early industry. So we talk about glass. Again, really rare photos. The one on the left has never been published. Many have never been published. That's Gene Dorner took that of the Glasgow factory before it's gone now, and stuff that he was shooting in the 60s. And of course, tanning, and then the hoops, which is so interesting also. And then mountain houses, different aspects of boarding houses, blacks and Jews. I mean, we just go on and on. I'm just going to zip through. We're almost through there. The painters and how they relate. One of the most important things of this section is the 1820s, which were just entering that 200 years ago, starting in the teens with the blue tanning industry, and then where things really come together with at the same time, as you all know, of course, with the mountain houses in the early mid 20s and the Hudson River School. So I really like to point out how that's all mixed together, as you can see in the lower left-hand corner. So I think that often doesn't get presented in the strongest way possible. These things sort of stay separate with a little touch. So that's one of the things I was hoping to do here. More on the Hudson River School. Of course, the canal. I have to be able to hold my head high when I see Bill at the coffee house. We're really proud of this section. And another rare Gene Dorner, lower center left of the old, that's right at Rondout Creek, one of the old canal boats. Bluestone industry. Sometimes just spreads of just the whole photograph, taking the whole spread to enjoy. And the quality of these, you can zoom in, it's incredible. The brick industry, just love this. Like, this is a typical of what we're trying to do here, where on the left, you see the brick maker. Then the center lower one is, we talk about Italians and blacks working together, how Hutton was the main company, especially towards the end, and then bluestone and brick were the signature kind of architecture of New York City, which is and then the remnants today, which is sort of this poetic remnants of a beach of brick, and stuff like that. So maps we love. I'm just zipping through ice harvesting, steamers, and then you'll see now a little bit of Kingston Point. I'm of course just really zipping through here, and then railroads. I love this one. This for me was always like, I couldn't figure out who's who and connected to what. So we made this chart where you really just get to see like who, starting with John Jervis and how everything kind of flows from him with James McEntee and then his clan and Calvert Vaux and his son. He married the daughter of McEntee, of course, and then Downing does Kingston Point Park. It's just amazing. So this was fun to put together. We still have yet to lay out more about the McEntee family, how important they are, Cornell, Kirkendall, and then a reservoir, of course, still working on that. And then we have the art colonies, the 4 of them. There's actually a 5th one that I'm not sure if I should put, but Cragsmore, which often gets overlooked. Of course, Birdcliff, Maverick, and then Group 212, which was in Woodstock in the 60s, which I made a short film on the film that I'm working on the history of the arts in Woodstock. You can see that on my site if you want, Blauweiss Media, under film projects. And then the arts, of course, IBM, and then finishing. So that's just that's 90 pages of our introduction to the book on Kingston. So now I'm going to jump to the video presentation of that. And I'm just going to let it play, okay? You guys still okay? I didn't
Yeah, we're
overwhelm
good.
yet?
No, this is great.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, great. Hold on. I just have to launch. So I'm going to just, oh yeah. So this video, it's still kind of rough. So we've actually just about produced the full hour where you're going to see 17 minutes. The audio gets a little uneven. I haven't gotten to restoring all the photographs and stuff. So it's a work in progress, but it's pretty tight. So, and then you'll see the first title, of course, last night when I rendered it, it screwed up, but you'll see the subsequent ones look nice of the style we're doing. So you'll see like a little section with a title, Be Clear, and then you'll see a little black, and then it'll go to another one. So it's a little bit of a non sequitur where they start and end, but you'll get it. And 1 second. Here we go. Share. All righty. If it's too loud or something, let me know, or not loud enough. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we need the sound turned up.
Yeah, I didn't play it yet, but I was trying to fill the screen. The sound doesn't come till there you go.
Indigenous groups that populated the area. The Lenape occupied a territory from what is now Kingston all the way south to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. This is a 1735 painting that depicts a chief of the Lenape named Napawinsa. The clan that lived in this area was called the Esopus, which means small river. This was the name that Henry Hudson used for the area that was later named Wiltwyck by the Dutch and ultimately Kingston. And we still have a town and a creek today called Esopus. The Mohicans lived in the region north of the Lenape from present-day Kingston up to Lake Champlain, west to the Schoharie Valley, and east into Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Vermont. This painting of Mohican chief Etau Ocoam was actually commissioned by the Queen during a 1710 visit to London by 4 Native American leaders. The red cloak that he's wearing is a British contribution that was thought to portray to a European audience the high social standing of the chief.
We need to up the sound.
Okay.
Iroquois refers to a confederacy of tribes located in upstate New York between the Adirondack Mountains and Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
Comprised of the Cayuga, Onondaga,
Is that better?
Seneca,
Better.
Oneida, and
Better.
Mohawk tribes.
Yep.
The confederacy is more accurately called the Haudenosaunee. The term Iroquois was actually coined by the French, Iroquois. This map from 1775 shows their territory, and the tribe that lived closest to today's Ulster County were the Mohawks. In 1609, when Henry Hudson sailed up the river, which the Lenape called the Mahikatunik, which means the river that runs both ways, there were about 6,000 and 12,000 Native Americans living along its shores. As we discuss in the book, contact with the colonizers had a devastating effect on the population. The Dutch East India Company was founded in 1602 to engage in trade with the Far East, where highly sought after textiles and spices, such as pepper, cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon,
which made British food taste a little better, could be acquired. It was the first company to sell public stock and is often considered a predecessor of today's multinational corporations. This crest shows Poseidon, Greek god of the sea, holding a trident, and Aphrodite, Greek god of seafaring, holding a mirror. They're known as Neptune and Venus in Roman mythology. The crest is adorned by all sorts of maritime symbols. The initials at the top that you can see here, VOC, refer to the Dutch name, which I'm not going to embarrass myself trying to pronounce. Kind of feel like I nailed the indigenous names. Englishman Henry Hudson was hired by the Dutch East India Company to seek a shorter route from the Atlantic to the Pacific via the elusive Northwest Passage. Hudson had actually attempted the trip a couple of times before for the British, but it was his voyage for the Dutch in 1609 on the 85-foot wooden vessel Half Moon that you can see here that reached what is now New York. He sailed north on the river that would later bear his name, reaching a point near present-day Albany. He wasn't the first explorer to visit the region, but it was his voyage that spurred the Netherlands to establish trading posts in the area that launched decades of Dutch colonization. This is a well-known 1835 painting at Verplank Point in Westchester County, typical of those that romanticize Hudson's first encounters with Native Americans. In 1611, Hudson embarked once again on an attempt to find the sea route west, but after a difficult winter stuck in ice in Canada, his crew rebelled and cast him, his teenage son, and 7 loyalists into a lifeboat and left them adrift at sea, and they were never seen again.
Hemlock trees were so important to this story. They were everywhere. They created a bluish hue in the area. There were such large trees. Some of them were 11 feet in circumference. Ancient trees that were all throughout the area. They were important for their bark. Hemlock trees were key to this part of the story. Their bark was the main ingredient to the tanning solution that was used to tan hides. Hides were brought from even as far as South America. Tanning was literally a back-breaking job. You could see the tanners here leaning over, having to remove the fur. They created these very toxic solutions from the bark. This etching shows the bark peelers at work. After they would lay areas to waste, they would move on to the next area till they deforested the whole area. And those trees don't exist anymore. Large primeval trees are gone forever. They would even move the whole operation to a new location closer to the bark. Bark peelers could only work a few months a year. The weather had to warm up enough so that the sap wasn't frozen, and by fall, they had to stop working. They would usually peel just the bottom 4 feet of the tree and let the rest go to waste. Hemlock wood was very coarse and there wasn't too many uses for it, although some of the wood could be used for projects with rough finishes such as docks and the plank roads that were starting to be built. But most of it was just laid to waste. So a couple of years after early industry started, one of the key main factors was the publication of Rip Van Winkle by Manhattan native Washington Irving. It sparked the imagination of the country, and such a focus was on the Catskills. He admitted sometime later that he was actually in England when he wrote it, and also that he had never even been to the Catskill Mountains. This statue is actually at the top of Hunter Mountain, and if you're willing to trek all the way up, or if you ski, you can see it. We wound up trekking to get this photograph. So this map shows you the relationship of Kingston in the lower right. You can see Woodstock just above, and then just above that is the area that we're about to discuss. This is the Catskill Mountain House, built in 1824. This was the first of the many that would come later. It was very difficult to get to, as you can see with this horse climbing up. It was just very steep terrain. On your way up to the Mountain House, you would come across this house, which was said to be Rip Van Winkle's back in the day. And it had all these little souvenirs and tchotchkes. You can get a little something to drink. One could certainly say this was America's first tourist trap. Just imagine traveling on these roads today. Sometimes it was easier to just get out and walk for part of the way. Now, this is an interesting view right in front of the Mountain House, people milling about. It was somewhat conservative, but this is the dress of the day, and people even go hiking in these outfits. They're standing on the cliff right in front, just looks out upon the Hudson River. It's such a great view, as you can see here. We took a little hike up there to get this view. And then if you look in the background where that arrow is, and just beyond the flagpole is Sunset Rock. This is the reverse view from Sunset Rock. This happens to be a painting by Thomas Cole. You can see the hotel. Here you can see North-South Lake. And then way back there is Catskill Falls. And as we heard earlier, industry was destroying much of the natural surrounding. And Thomas Cole was very concerned. Bluestone, the tanning, and he was painting in the area. This is a very famous painting of Catskill Falls. Most of his paintings had a romantic slant to them, not only in the lighting and the depiction of the scene. Like, for instance, here, he put a Native American right in the center of the painting. Many of the Native Americans had already started to be pushed out west. The indigenous peoples from this area were first pushed out to Oklahoma and then Wisconsin. And here you can see Cole's fears came true with the Laurel House being built right on top of the falls. By the late 1870s, early 80s, the railroad came right up to these mountain houses. And then this is from a brochure of the Laurel House in its last years in the late 50s, early 60s. This is a series of photos that photographer and historian Jean Dorner shot in its last year, around 1967, one in the fall and one in the winter. And then very shortly after this, the state burned it and turned this whole area into a state park. Here's what Catskill Falls looks like today.
There were also 108 locks, not related to the number of miles. They were just placed where they were needed. The way a lock works, you can see here, this diagram, which is actually from the Erie Canal, but they work the same way. And they allow boats to travel through different levels of terrain. Boats were pulled along the towpath by mules. Often kids were in charge of leading the mules. You can see here in this wonderful photo. The story is that there was often a photographer perched at a place where boats might have to wait for a lock to be available and where he knew that they would have to pass through again on their return trip. So he would take a photo and then try to sell it on the boat's return trip. While they're waiting, you can see the mules are taking advantage of their feed bags. Whole families would work on these boats. You can see them all posing here. The boats were rented by the drivers, and once they were paid in full, they were allowed to give them a name. You can see in this photo that this boat is named Little Freddie, possibly after this little guy. The chief engineer, John Jervis, had learned many of his skills on the Erie Canal. Port Jervis is named after him. Jervis also designed a gravity railroad that you can see here to tackle a stretch of deep terrain in Pennsylvania. James McEntee was also an engineer. They had worked together on the Erie Canal, and he named his son Jervis after his fellow engineer. Jervis McEntee went on to become a notable Hudson River school painter from the Rondout. which we discuss later in the art section. This view is from the Wallkill Railroad Bridge, today the rail trail. You can see the creek on the right, the canal on the left, and here's a shot of what it looks like today. This is as you're coming into Rosendale from the west. Here you can see a canal boat being loaded with Rosendale cement, which became a whole other industry. You can see the cement barrels up here, sacks here. The cement was discovered while building the canal and was crucial to its construction. In addition to coal, many other products were also shipped on the canal. You can see in this photograph lots of lumber piled up on canal barges. They also shipped bluestone, salt, molasses, plaster, bricks, leather, glass, all sorts of agricultural goods, all transported up and down the D&H. Since the terminus of the D&H Canal was at Rondout, it really prospered as a village. As we mentioned earlier, many Irish, Italian, and German immigrants settled here, so many of the homes and businesses still standing today come from that era. And if you're familiar with the neighborhood, you'll recognize many names of the engineers and presidents of the D&H Canal Company as today's street names: Hone, McEntee, Wirtz, Jervis, President's Place.
The steamer lines and the railroads were intricately connected. Here's one of the dayliners coming into Kingston Point. One of the fun things to do was to see if any celebrities were on the boat as it arrived. You can see the trains waiting there to take some of the passengers up to the Catskill Mountain hotels. Some would stay for the day and enjoy the amusement park. Each ship was named after a famous personality. This one is the Heinrich Hudson. There was the Washington Irving and many others. In the 1890s, Kingston Point was just a small landing, and Kirkendall bought the land and the adjacent swamp and decided to build this amusement park that would be a draw for the dayliner that he had recently purchased. Then he built a railroad to go out to the Catskills past Phoenicia and figured, well, why don't I build a hotel? So this is the Grand Hotel owned by Kirkendall. The design is based on the Oriental Hotel that was in Coney Island. And he hired Downing Vaux, son of Calvert Vaux, who co-designed Central Park, and who also happened to be the nephew of Hudson River School painter Jervis McEntee. The park was beautifully landscaped. There were all kinds of things to do. There were arcades that you could play games, get photographs. There were rides, Ferris wheel. Crowds would come all day long, in and out, by ship, by train. Music was often being played by a live band in the gazebo. There was boating. There was the Oriental Hotel where one could stay overnight. Usually the women and the children would be enjoying the park while the men could go to the hotel, gamble, smoke, and drink. And the men loved that part. There was no drinking allowed in the park. Here you can see the busy park at the early part of the 20th century. In the foreground is the fancy Kingston Yacht Club. After World War II, the park was abandoned and forgotten. This is it in the 70s. It's a hidden treasure today by the river. These are remnants of what the tracks looked like back in the day. This is an exact view of where the ships and trains came in. By the early 1990s, the remnants of the trolley stop was still there, and the Rotary Club decided to come in and restore the park to some degree. It had been abandoned for years, not being used. This is what it looked like then. They came in and restored the park to some degree, put this nice gate at the front, and restored several of the gazebos and the old trolley stop. Here's a view of what it looks like today.
That's all we got for now.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, we actually have the whole hour pretty up there, but I mean, that's all that I wanted to present to you guys, which is more than you probably wanted, but
No, it's wonderful.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Andy, are you still accepting photographs or artifacts or things to relate it to what we've
Stephen,
seen?
not
Yeah.
Andy.
Stephen.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
that's okay. I answer to any name.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Yes, of course. We're still going to be working on it for, you know, until this through the spring, and so we absolutely were open. And corrections and anecdotes and
We want to send you stuff from Elverhoy Art Colony.
oh great. Oh really? I never heard of it. See, is that
Many people didn't.
that's not the one in Palinville? No, that's
No,
another.
it was in Milton.
Oh wow! So that's another one. See, that's what my favorite thing. It just thrilled me. So that we could have 5 or 6. That's fantastic. Love that.
Stephen,
Well,
this is Andy. What is your email address?
Right.
My email?
Yeah.
You can use, you see Blauweiss Media there on the screen. That's Karen. So you could do Stephen with a PH, STEPHEN at blauweissmedia.com. That's also our website. We have a new website that we're working on that we will actually have this, if Karen's listening, it's Hudson. I forgot what it is. It's brand new. It's Hudson Valley I think it's Hudson Valley History Projects with an S. It's so new that's going to be our site that we actually we'll let you know when we have these things on it. But if you poke around my site for now, you can see I also specialize in short films about artists. I've done about 100 of those of regional artists. I have about 40 short films just sitting there on my site if you poke around.
So that's Stephen at blauweissmedia.com.
Correct.
Okay.
And if you have a couple of more minutes, I did prepare like a mini version of the Kingston part of how those spreads are coming along if you want me to show, or
Everybody okay with that?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, please,
Okay.
please.
okay, one more quickie and then I'm open for questions. So I just put a select few of our Kingston part of the book, since that's what we're doing. Just gives you a little, you'll see that a lot of times we have the text Greeked in, and that's the approach we take as, you know, a designer, historian, and filmmaker. I mean, writing is new to me. Karen, you know, does the main part of the bulk of the writing. I contribute to the writing, and then she does the final cleanups to make it, you know, really beautiful. And then we have an amazing copy editor. But the story is told. I do it through the imagery mainly. So, and then we place the imagery, see what we have, what can we find, and then we leave a certain amount for text, and then we write the text. So this is sort of in a little bit rough draft. So you can see that, like for instance, this is an example of Wall Street. We have a whole section on Wall Street, and you can see the comparison of buildings. So going back 100 years, 50 years, and today. So we try to do that as much as possible to bring it up to date, bring it right up to today. Here's another example on the left, just again, the layout. So we're looking at spreads here again. So you have the original building on the corner of John and Wall, which was the bank, then a color version. And then it was actually changed completely, the outside in the 40s, late 40, about 49. And now, of course, it's the Kingsley Hotel. I meant Kingsley. It's the Kingsley Hotel. But
Kingsley.
and there's another view. So just going, you know, lots of detail. So tell the history, but also again, the visual. One of the things about the video you just saw, the films that we do, and the book is, it's sort of like a collage. I think of it all as a collage, and you could see it's almost like a storyboard, the book itself. Just finding imagery like from just different places and how to, you know, place them, make the story make sense. And then the great thing about doing the text last, and I've been in publishing for, you know, 40 years also, as well as doing the filmmaking. I don't know what that means, the text I just got. But no,
okay.
the, what was I gonna say?
Well,
No,
things
working this
change.
way forces us to be concise.
Right.
So sometimes, one of the things that, and I love historians and they're my idols and everything, but sometimes they get a little lost in the weeds, and this forces us to that's as much as room as you have to say. And of course, sometimes we're compromising, got to make the image a little smaller to fit it in, or sometimes take an image out, but it really forces us to be right on there. A unique little spread about the old Opera House uptown, which is really like a music hall. We have a whole section on hotels. This is the Governor Clinton, opened in the late 20s. Again, mix of archives. Several times we just have these spreads. The quality of these photographs that we do is just crazy. I don't know if I'm gonna mess this up now, but if I try to zoom, look at this. I mean, this is just insane. So when we do our subsequent versions of the other Kingston series, I will explain like what these stores were and things like that. Do you still seeing it move forward?
Yep. Yeah,
Yes.
we're good.
Okay. And so here again, matching
dogs.
different times, and yeah, everyone has their favorite, stores and remembers them, and wonderful rare photographs, corner of Fair and North Front, and you see the Senate Garage. We give that history, and then the shanty, wonderful photography, and then we love maps. So there's a whole section on the stone houses, and we say where they are, and we give little histories. We have all kinds of vignettes and things. We've got that on the right is from the Library of Congress. That's the home that where Friends of Historic Kingston, your sister organization, is, and the original Kingston Academy, and today, of course, the wonderful bookstore, Senate House. We have some things on the churches we do. You can see some parts are written already. Trying to, give unique and engaging way that you could just open the book anywhere. If you know our other book, you can kind of start anywhere, you can jump around, or it's told as a very clear story, even all these disparate things. Each one of these churches, burning of Kingston. Oddly enough, it was just a perfect thing to add in the upper right, what is one of Jean Donner's from the late 60s. We have a whole section on where urban renewal happened uptown also, and that was actually a family that left in the late 60s. That's Frog Alley, and it burns, but it just happened to work with this of what, people saw when the British came. Some of the personalities, John Jay, and of course, Sojourner Truth. We do a bunch of different personalities. The Seal College, that even some natives in their late 70s who were around when this was around don't remember this. So we're tapping into some unique history. This was right by where the creek, the Washington Bridge Creek is. It was right there from the 30s to the 50s.
Funny.
And of course, huge garment industry in Kingston, excuse me. And then, adaptive reuse, showing the buildings, how they are, have they evolved through history. That's the lace mill in the 50s. It was abandoned for many years. And of course, the beautiful renovation by Scott Dutton and Rupco. And then this is from our post office book, but I committed, I got to do it. So 800 thumbnails. I don't know when I'll get to that, but will be part of the book. And so that just gives you one more little since it is a book about Kingston, I just wanted to show you a little bit about that part of the book.
Stephen, we're just so honored that you gave us this preview. It's fabulous. And,
Thanks.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, great.
Incredible.
It's a little scary to present to people who know like you guys. So I really appreciate your response.
I don't know how you've managed to cram so much in there and keep it realistic. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And
the
I
big-
did learn something today.
Oh, good. See,
I never knew
I can
about
always
Steele
make a-
College.
if we get you one thing, two, one there, you know, to the experts, so
Yeah.
we can still pull that off, which feels good. Because we don't, I mean, we'll never, and you know, anyone who knows a bunch about a topic, you'll never know everything.
Yeah.
And there's just, this area is insane how you could just spend 2 lifetimes. There's just so much. So we just have a thrill with it. And then I think we made I can't think of the right word after speaking so much, but a tentative booking of when we might present this. But we still need a little more time. So if it's okay, I know there weren't any responses yet, and I know the $10 and people and they don't. I think once we start getting it out there a little bit, and now that this was perfect, presenting to all of you helped us. You know how it is, like I pushed to get this little deadline done. So now we have like a little kind of preview trailer. I'll trim that down and then we'll have that online and it'll maybe entice people. And so it definitely helped move the whole thing forward a bit. If we may, and just take our presentation date off the plate for another 2 weeks or something like that. And then we'll get back to you and just say, could we then like say, okay, I think we're ready now.
Yeah, that's good. Just let us
Okay.
know as soon as you're ready.
All right. And any other
Yeah, I'll
questions?
be an early buyer of your book, Steve.
Sorry?
I'll be an early buyer of your book.
Okay.
Me too. Stephen, are you going to touch at all on the painters in Kingston? I know
Yes,
you talk about
Tubby. Yes, absolutely. So we have
People like
Tubby McEntee for sure. And
John Vanderlyn.
Vanderlyn
Yes,
also.
he's in there.
We have a great section on Vanderlyn.
Okay, good.
Okay,
About the panoramas and everything. And then the cool thing about, and especially that Hamilton is so hot now. We have Aaron Burr and how they're close related and all that.
Yeah, Joanna, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. This was just marvelous.
Thank you.
My field is theater, and I moved here a few years back and have not really explored the performing arts historically in the area, but I'm wondering if that's of interest to you and will be part of it. I would imagine there's a lot there as well.
We do. I mean, what the thing that would be cool is what we want to do is have this become a success, because basically what we can't lose sight of is that this is really a book about Kingston and it's just this Ulster County. So what we're hoping is if this can be good and the powers that be, like some of, let's say, you know, the Chamber of Commerce, some of the banks, some of the big boys, as we like to say, my track record is starting to expand, you know, over the years with the, you know, the exhibitions and the first book and now a second book and the feature films and the other presentations we've done about Woodstock, that we could maybe next year say, hey, we'd like to do a book about Ulster County, which certainly deserves it, and tease these things out. And then that's where we could really give that do justice to a subject like that, you know.
Have you researched at all what was going on in Kingston in terms of theaters? And
no, there were 3 opera houses basically, you know.
Yeah.
So we will touch on those. Those will be represented a little bit.
Good. So there'll be a baby step into that.
Yeah, and we do have, you saw the one, the Uptown one, which was more of a music hall, and we will mention the ones downtown. And so I kind of, what happened was, you know, it started the depth of me doing the presentations. I started like 40 plus years ago with New York City history, and then came up here 21 years ago, and then slowly got more and more into it. And then with Lost Rondout, which we started, I guess, about like 7 or 8 years ago, that kind of got me real deep into it. So if you look at it, it's like that Lost Rondout is about downtown. As you know, the Post Office book is really a sneaky way to tell the history of Midtown. And then this one's about Uptown, but we kind of pulled back a little in the sense of a wider net, so that this introduction that you've seen now, which I really feel is so important to set the tone of where Kingston stands in, you know, time and geographically and geology and everything. And then we added a little bit about, there is some section of Midtown and downtown. So I want it as a real standalone product, you know, even if someone hasn't seen those other ones.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you, Stephen, very much.
Thank
And
you all.
yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody for attending. And we're hoping that we can put all or part of this up on the Historical Society's website for the members who were not able to attend today.
Great. And then once we have that presentation, I think it'll be a slow, we'll get the word out, each one of these a series of 4 and things like that. And once people hear about it, and we really appreciate your contribution to helping us get the word out. And of course, you'll now have the credit in the book, and you get 2 books. And we really, that makes us feel like it's a little badge for us that you're, part of it in that way. So.
Well, we're happy to do whatever we can to promote you.
All right. Thanks all.
Okay,
Contact us anytime if you think of something where you say, oh my God, he had that totally wrong, or you have a lead for us or photographs or anything like that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Members of the board and the members who came, thank you very much for attending. Johanna, you came in late, but if we put up this recording, you'll be able to attend the rest of the meeting virtually if you like. And thank you. Okay, I'm going to end the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye everybody.